Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic Shahada channel. When many Americans hear the word Iran, the associations are immediate and often predictable. Nuclear weapons, chants of death to America, images of angry crowds, missile tests, and headlines about sanctions or military tensions. When they hear Islam and Iran, the picture becomes even narrower. It is often imagined as a rigid, state-enforced religion that dominates every aspect of life, suppresses dissent, and exports extremism beyond its borders. In much of American media coverage over the past 4 decades, Iran has been framed primarily as a security threat, and Islam has been presented as the ideological engine behind that threat. This perception did not emerge in a vacuum. It was shaped by the 1979 hostage crisis, decades of diplomatic rupture, disputes over Iran's nuclear program, regional conflicts, and repeated cycles of sanctions and confrontation. Political rhetoric in the United States has frequently described Iran as a leading state sponsor of terrorism and a destabilizing force in the Middle East. Challenging the dominant perception is not about denying real tensions between Iran and the United States, nor about ignoring Iran's political system or its controversial policies. It is about recognizing that Islam and Iran cannot be understood solely through the lens of geopolitics. A government's actions do not fully define the beliefs, motivations, or daily realities of an entire population. When Islam is viewed only as an instrument of state power, the human dimension disappears. To understand Islam and Iran, it is important to begin with who the people are and what they believe. Today, around 90 to 95% of Muslims in Iran follow 12 or Shia Islam. This makes Iran the largest Shia majority country in the world. The remaining Muslim population is mostly Sunni, and they live mainly in specific regions, such as parts of western Iran near Kurdistan, the southeast near Pakistan and Afghanistan, and some areas in the north. Iran is also home to small but officially recognized religious minorities, including Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians. These communities have lived in Iran for centuries, some even before the arrival of Islam. This basic fact already challenges a common idea held by many people outside the region, especially in the United States. Islam is often seen as one single, uniform religion practiced the same way everywhere. In reality, Islam has different branches, traditions, and local expressions. Iran represents one of the clearest examples of this diversity because Shia Islam, not Sunni Islam, shapes the country's religious life, history, and identity. It is also important to understand that Iran was not always a Shia country. For many centuries after Islam first arrived in Persia, most of the population followed Sunni Islam. The major turning point came in the early 16th century when the Safavid dynasty came to power. In 1501, the Safavid rulers declared 12 or Shia Islam as the official religion of the state. This decision changed the future of Iran in lasting ways. The Safavid choice was not only about religious belief, it was also about building a strong and united state. At that time, Iran was surrounded by powerful Sunni empires, especially the Ottoman Empire to the west. By adopting Shia Islam, the Safavid rulers created a clear religious identity that separated Iran from its neighbors. Over time, the state encouraged the population to adopt Shia practices through education, religious institutions, and public rituals. This process took generations, but it eventually transformed Iran into a Shia majority society. As Shia Islam spread, it became closely tied to Iranian culture. Religious events such as Ashura, which remembers the death of Imam Hussein, became central moments in public life. These gatherings were not only about faith, they also carried themes of justice, sacrifice, and resistance to oppression. Religious scholars gained respect and influence, not only as teachers of faith, but also as moral figures in society. Mosques, religious schools, and shrines became important places for learning, social support, and community life. Because of this long history, Islam in Iran developed as more than a set of religious rules. It became part of the country's shared memory and identity. For many Iranians, being Shia is connected to family traditions, national history, and cultural pride. It shapes how people mark important moments in life, how they understand right and wrong, and how they relate to their past. This context is essential for understanding modern Iran. Islam in Iran did not begin with the Islamic Republic or the 1979 revolution. It existed long before the modern state and continues beyond politics. While the government uses religious language and symbols, the roots of Islam in Iranian society run much deeper than any single political system. To understand how Islam became part of the modern Iranian state, we need to look at the events of 1979. Before that year, Iran was ruled by a monarchy under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah promoted modernization, strong ties with the United States, and a more secular style of government. However, many Iranians were dissatisfied. Some criticized corruption and inequality. Others opposed political repression and the lack of democratic freedoms. Religious leaders also believed that the Shah's policies were weakening Islamic values in society. In 1979, after months of nationwide protests, strikes, and unrest, the monarchy collapsed. This event is known as the Iranian Revolution. It led to the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran. One of the central figures of this movement was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a senior Shia cleric who had been living in exile. Khomeini became the symbol of opposition to the Shah and eventually returned to Iran to lead the new political order. It is important to understand that the revolution was not only religious. Many groups participated in the movement, including secular nationalists, leftist organizations, students, and ordinary citizens, frustrated with the existing system. However, after the Shah was removed, religious leaders gained the strongest position and shaped the final structure of the new state. The new system was based on a key concept known as velayat-e-faqih, often translated as the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. This idea holds that a qualified Islamic scholar should have ultimate authority in political matters to ensure that the country is governed according to Islamic principles. Under this system, the supreme leader, a senior cleric, stands above the president and parliament in the political hierarchy. The supreme leader has significant power over the military, the judiciary, state media, and major national decisions. This structure means that Iran is not simply a democracy, nor is it a traditional monarchy. It is a hybrid system. Citizens vote for a president and members of parliament, but key institutions are overseen by religious authorities. The supreme leader plays a central role in guiding the direction of the country. It is also important to recognize that Iran did not become a religious state overnight. The 1979 revolution was the result of decades of tension between religious leaders and the monarchy. Shia clerics had long held influence in Iranian society, especially in areas such as law, education, and moral guidance. When political unrest grew, these networks allowed religious leaders to mobilize large numbers of people. After the revolution, a national referendum was held, and the majority of voters approved the establishment of the Islamic Republic. A new constitution was written, combining elements of republican governance with religious oversight. This document formally placed the concept of velayat-e-faqih at the center of the political system. When many Americans hear the word theocracy, they imagine a simple system where religious leaders control everything and ordinary citizens have no role in politics. Iran's system is more complex than that image. It combines elected institutions with religious oversight, creating a hybrid structure that does not fit neatly into Western political categories. Iran has a president, a parliament, and regular national elections. Citizens vote for the president every 4 years. They also elect members of parliament, known as the Majlis. These institutions debate laws, manage the national budget, and handle many day-to-day government responsibilities. On the surface, this looks similar to many republics around the world. However, above these elected offices stands the supreme leader. Since 1989, that position has been held by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The supreme leader is not elected by direct public vote. Instead, he is chosen by a body called the Assembly of Experts, whose members are themselves elected but must be approved through a religious and legal screening process. The supreme leader holds significant authority. He is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, has influence over the judiciary, appoints key officials, and has final say on major national policies, especially in areas like defense and foreign affairs. Another key institution is the Guardian Council. This body plays a powerful role in shaping the political system. It has 12 members, 6 Islamic jurists appointed by the supreme leader, and 6 legal experts nominated by the judiciary and approved by Parliament. The Guardian Council reviews laws passed by Parliament to ensure they align with the Constitution and with Islamic principles. If a law does not meet these standards, it can be rejected. The Council also reviews and approves candidates who wish to run for president or parliament. This means not everyone who wants to run for office is allowed to compete.
When many Americans hear the word theocracy, they imagine a simple system where religious leaders control everything and ordinary citizens have no role in politics. Iran's system is more complex than that image. It combines elected institutions with religious oversight, creating a hybrid structure that does not fit neatly into Western political categories. Iran has a president, a parliament, and regular national elections. Citizens vote for the president every 4 years. They also elect members of parliament, known as the Majlis. These institutions debate laws, manage the national budget, and handle many day-to-day government responsibilities. On the surface, this looks similar to many republics around the world. However, above these elected offices stands the supreme leader. Since 1989, that position has been held by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The supreme leader is not elected by direct public vote. Instead, he is chosen by a body called the Assembly of Experts, whose members are themselves elected but must be approved through a religious and legal screening process. The supreme leader holds significant authority. He is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, has influence over the judiciary, appoints key officials, and has final say on major national policies, especially in areas like defense and foreign affairs. Another key institution is the Guardian Council. This body plays a powerful role in shaping the political system. It has 12 members, 6 Islamic jurists appointed by the supreme leader, and 6 legal experts nominated by the judiciary and approved by Parliament. The Guardian Council reviews laws passed by Parliament to ensure they align with the Constitution and with Islamic principles. If a law does not meet these standards, it can be rejected. The Council also reviews and approves candidates who wish to run for president or parliament. This means not everyone who wants to run for office is allowed to compete. Because of these institutions, Iran's political system operates on 2 levels at the same time. On one level, there are elections, political campaigns, and public debates. On another level, there is religious supervision intended to ensure that the direction of the country remains within the framework of Islamic law as interpreted by senior clerics. This structure creates ongoing tension inside the system. Some political figures push for reform, social change, or more engagement with the international community. Others emphasize preserving revolutionary principles and maintaining strict religious standards. These debates take place within the boundaries set by the Constitution and the authority of the supreme leader. It is also important to understand that public participation in elections has varied over time. In some periods, voter turnout has been high, showing strong engagement. In other elections, turnout has dropped, reflecting public frustration or disillusionment. This fluctuation reveals that Iranian society is not politically uniform. There are diverse opinions about how the country should be governed. The essential point is that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not a simple religious dictatorship, nor is it a liberal democracy. It is a complex hybrid system that blends republican elements with clerical authority. Religious leaders do not manage every local issue. but they do hold ultimate oversight over the direction of the state. To understand modern Iran, it is not enough to talk only about religion or elections. One of the most powerful institutions in the country is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, widely known as the IRGC. It was created in 1979, shortly after the revolution, with the original purpose of protecting the new Islamic system from internal and external threats. Over time, it has grown into one of the most influential forces in Iran. The IRGC operates alongside the regular national army, but it answers directly to the supreme leader. This gives it a special position within the power structure. It controls its own ground forces, navy, and aerospace units, including Iran's ballistic missile program. It also oversees the Quds Force, which manages operations beyond Iran's borders. Through these channels, Iran has supported allied groups and governments in countries such as Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. This regional involvement is one reason why the IRGC is often mentioned in international news coverage, and why it plays a major role in Iran's foreign policy. However, the IRGC is not only a military organization. Over the years, it has expanded deeply into the economy. Companies connected to the IRGC are active in construction, energy, telecommunications, and infrastructure. Major national projects, including oil and gas development and large public works, have been awarded to firms linked to the Guard. This economic presence gives the organization financial independence and additional influence inside the country. The IRGC also has political influence. Former members have run for parliament and other public offices. Its leadership regularly comments on national security, foreign relations, and what it sees as threats to the revolution. While Iran has elected institutions, the IRGC remains a powerful voice in shaping the country's strategic direction. In recent years, tensions between Iran and Western governments, especially the United States, have often involved the IRGC directly. It has been subject to sanctions and international pressure. At the same time, inside Iran, some citizens view the IRGC as a defender of national sovereignty, particularly during periods of external pressure. Others criticize its growing role in the economy and politics, arguing that it limits competition and concentrates power. If confirmed by multiple credible international sources, the death of Ali Khamenei in a major military attack would represent one of the most significant turning points in the history of the Islamic Republic since 1979. For nearly 37 years, Khamenei stood at the top of Iran's political and religious structure. As supreme leader, he was not only the highest political authority in the country, but also its most senior religious figure. His position unified state power, military command, and religious legitimacy in one office. Khamenei became supreme leader in 1989 after the death of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. During his leadership, he oversaw major events, internal reform movements, economic crises, international sanctions, nuclear negotiations, regional conflicts, and repeated waves of domestic protests. Over time, he consolidated authority around the office of the supreme leader, strengthening institutions loyal to that office, including the judiciary, state media, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. His leadership style emphasized resistance to Western pressure, preservation of revolutionary values, and centralized religious oversight of the political system. If his death occurred as a result of a military strike, the impact would be even more profound. It would not simply be a leadership transition due to age or illness. It would raise immediate questions about national security, internal stability, and Iran's response on the international stage. The symbolism would also be powerful. The supreme leader is presented within Iran's political framework as the guardian of the revolution and the protector of Islamic governance. A sudden, violent end to that leadership would create both emotional and political shockwaves. According to Iran's constitution, the Assembly of Experts is responsible for selecting the next supreme leader. This body, composed of Islamic scholars elected by the public but vetted by the Guardian Council, would need to convene and determine a successor. In theory, the transition is legally structured. In practice, such a moment could expose internal divisions among political elites, clerical authorities, and security institutions. Different factions may hold different visions for the future direction of the country. This moment would also test the balance between religious authority and state power. The supreme leader is the central link between Islam as a governing principle and the institutions of the republic. Without that figure, even temporarily, the system enters a sensitive phase. The question becomes whether the next leader will maintain the same level of centralized authority or whether the structure could shift toward a slightly different balance of power. Internationally, such a development would immediately affect regional dynamics. Iran's relationships with neighboring countries, its involvement in regional conflicts, and its negotiations over sanctions and nuclear policy would all be reevaluated. Allies and adversaries alike would be watching closely to understand whether Iran's strategic direction would remain consistent or change under new leadership. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Iran is the relationship between personal faith and political power. Outside observers often assume that if the state defines itself as Islamic, then the population must fully support both the religion and the political system in the same way. In reality, the situation is more complex. Many Iranians continue to identify as Muslim and maintain religious beliefs, family traditions, and cultural practices. At the same time, this does not automatically mean they support every policy or structure of the Islamic Republic. Iran remains a deeply religious society in many ways. Major religious holidays, such as Ramadan and Ashura, are widely observed. Shrines in cities like Mashhad and Qom continue to attract millions of visitors. Religious language and symbolism remain part of daily life. For many families, faith is personal, connected to upbringing, morality, and identity, rather than politics. However, over the past 2 decades, surveys, public debates, and waves of protest have shown that some Iranians distinguish between Islam as a religion and the political system that governs in its name. Criticism directed at the government is often about economic hardship, political restrictions, corruption, or lack of social freedoms. In many cases, those criticisms are aimed at state institutions, not at Islam itself. This distinction is important. Being critical of political leadership does not necessarily mean rejecting faith. This separation between religion and governance has become more visible during periods of public unrest. Protest movements in recent years have included people from different backgrounds, including those who still identify as Muslim. Some argue that religion should remain part of cultural life, but not dominate state policy. Others support maintaining the current structure, but with reforms. There is no single unified public opinion. At the same time, it is also true that a portion of the population strongly supports the existing system and believes that Islamic governance protects moral values and national independence. For these citizens, separating religion from politics would weaken the foundation of the country. This ongoing debate reflects a society that is not religiously uniform in its political views. For decades, economic sanctions imposed by the United States and other Western governments have been one of the most persistent pressures on Iran's economy. These measures, especially those targeting Iran's oil exports, banking system, and access to international markets, have had deep and wide-ranging effects on both the country's economy and the daily lives of its people. Iran's economy is heavily dependent on oil revenue. Before sanctions intensified, oil exports were a major source of government income and foreign currency. But comprehensive sanctions have repeatedly cut Iran off from much of the global energy market, significantly reducing its ability to sell oil abroad and earn revenue. This loss of income has shrunk the government's capacity to fund public services and support stabilizing measures. The impact on ordinary Iranians has been profound. Sanctions have contributed to persistent high inflation, with prices for basic goods rising sharply. Food, fuel, housing, and transportation have all become more expensive, eroding household savings and reducing purchasing power. More than 30 million Iranians, roughly 1 in 3, have been estimated to live below the poverty line in recent years, as inflation rates remained high and wage growth failed to keep pace with rising costs. The national currency, the rial, has suffered a long decline in value. In some periods, it fell to historic lows against the US dollar, making imports vastly more expensive and deepening the cost of living crisis. Basic necessities often cost far more than families can afford, and many Iranians report relying on informal credit, extended family support, or reducing consumption just to get by. Unemployment has also been a chronic issue. Sanctions disrupt investment, trade, and business operations. Industries that relied on imported equipment or foreign partners have struggled to survive, leading to layoffs or closures. Youth employment, in particular, has been a persistent challenge, contributing to frustration among younger generations who feel shut out of economic opportunity. The economic strain brought by sanctions has frequently spilled over into political life. When people cannot afford food, fuel, or basic services, grievances mount. Protests in recent years, including demonstrations by shopkeepers, students, and workers in many cities, have often been sparked or intensified by economic hardship. These protests are not always framed solely as religious or political movements. They reflect daily frustrations with declining living standards and a sense that the government has failed to protect economic well-being. It is also important to note that sanctions have not affected all Iranians equally. Middle-class households, which once provided relative stability and hope for economic progress, have seen their savings eroded and their prospects dimmed. Reports based on economic modeling suggest that if sanctions had not been in place over recent decades, Iran's middle class could have been significantly larger, with higher incomes and greater economic security. In some official discourse inside Iran, leaders emphasize domestic factors, such as government corruption or management issues, as causes of economic hardship, sometimes downplaying the impact of sanctions. Yet independent estimates and real-world experiences show that sanctions act like a multiplier, worsening underlying economic problems and making everyday life more difficult for millions of Iranians. When we talk about Iran's foreign policy, it is common to focus on strategic interests, such as security, alliances, or regional influence. What is often less understood outside the Middle East is how religious identity and political strategy are intertwined in Iran's approach to geopolitics. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran has used religious language and symbols as part of the way it explains and justifies its role on the regional stage. This is not simply about theological belief. It is a form of political identity that carries meaning for both domestic and foreign audiences. One clear example of this strategy is Iran's support for armed groups in countries such as Lebanon and Yemen. In Lebanon, Iran has long supported Hezbollah, a Shia political and military organization that operates both as a political party and as an armed force. Hezbollah's ideology and leadership remain closely aligned with Iran, and Tehran has provided it with financial resources, weapons, and training over decades. This support has helped Hezbollah become one of the most powerful non-state actors in Lebanon, with influence in politics, social services, and security. In Yemen, Iran's involvement has been tied to the Houthi movement, a group with roots in Shia Islam. While Tehran and the Houthis have sometimes denied the extent of the connection, there is documented evidence that Iran has supplied political backing, training, and material support to the group's leadership. This assistance has enabled the Houthis to maintain control over significant parts of Yemen's territory and resist military campaigns by a Saudi-led coalition. Iran's support for these groups is often spoken about in religious terms, framed as solidarity with fellow Shia or as resistance against perceived oppression by Sunni-led states and their Western allies. But the underlying motivation also involves strategic considerations, creating networks of influence that can extend Iran's geopolitical reach, shape regional power balances, and challenge rivals such as Saudi Arabia or Israel. This combination of religion and strategy can be confusing for international audiences, especially in the United States and Europe, where foreign policy is typically discussed in secular terms. In Iran's worldview, religious identity and political interest are not separate categories. They reinforce each other. For example, framing foreign policy as support for fellow Muslims or the oppressed helps build political legitimacy both at home and among sympathetic groups abroad. It also appeals to historical narratives that emphasize resistance to external influence. Importantly, this does not mean that Iran's relationships are strictly religious in nature. Many of the connections are also political, economic, or military. Groups like Hezbollah or the Houthis pursue their own agendas and respond to local conditions. But Iran's use of religious rhetoric and symbolism makes these alliances more resilient and harder for opponents to dismiss as purely transactional. It turns political allies into ideological partners, at least in the public narrative. At the same time, this strategy has consequences. It contributes to sectarian tensions between Shia and Sunni communities in the region, most notably in conflicts such as Syria and Yemen, and it has made Iran a central player in competing regional networks. These sectarian elements have sometimes aggravated conflicts that might have been political or territorial in nature. When Western news outlets report on Iran, certain themes tend to dominate the headlines. Coverage often focuses on Iran's nuclear program, its tensions with the United States and Israel, protests, human rights issues, and allegations of extremism. These topics matter and deserve attention, but when they take up the majority of coverage, they can create a narrow picture of the country that overlooks other aspects of Iranian life. Analysis of Western reporting on Iran's nuclear program, for example, shows that articles frequently emphasize conflict and suspicion, without exploring the broader context of regional diplomacy, domestic politics, or national security concerns from multiple perspectives. Many observers and scholars argue that this focus has led to stereotypes and simplifications in media portrayals. Western media often frame Iran as dangerous or confrontational, reinforcing long-standing narratives rather than showing the full range of social, cultural, and political experiences inside the country. Research on media representation describes how Iran is portrayed as a threat to global security, obscuring the fact that Iranian society is diverse and not defined solely by the actions of its government or foreign policy. Another issue is access. Foreign correspondents working in Iran often face restrictions, which can shape what they are able to report. Some analysts say that journalists may rely on official sources or government-supervised events in order to maintain access, which can limit the range of viewpoints that are presented in international headlines. The result is that the lived daily experiences of many Iranians, their work, family life, education, celebrations, and personal struggles, receive far less coverage than international crises and political disputes. People outside Iran rarely see stories about ordinary life in cities like Tehran, Isfahan, or Shiraz, or hear voices of teachers, engineers, small business owners, and young professionals. Instead, the narrative can become dominated by military posturing, nuclear negotiations, protests, and allegations of extremism. This does not mean Western media ignore all social issues. Some outlets do report on women's rights, economic conditions, and protests. But these stories are often tied to conflict or framed within broader geopolitical struggles. Without careful context, audiences can come away with the impression that Iran is only a place of conflict, tension, and repression, rather than a country where millions of people work, study, create families, and pursue their goals. Many Americans often miss several key realities about Islam in Iran. First, Islam in Iran is not monolithic. Although the majority of the population identifies as Twelver Shia Muslim, religious belief is practiced in many different ways. Some Iranians are highly observant and closely follow religious rituals. Others are culturally connected to Islam, but less strict in daily practice. There are also Sunni Muslim communities and officially recognized religious minorities, such as Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians. Even within Shia Islam, interpretations and levels of religious commitment vary. Presenting Islam in Iran as a single, uniform bloc ignores this diversity. Second, the theocratic structure of the Islamic Republic is a modern political system, not a timeless expression of Islam. It was established after the 1979 revolution and formalized in a written constitution. The concept of clerical oversight of the state reflects a specific interpretation of Shia political thought, particularly the idea that a senior Islamic jurist should guide governance. However, this model is not shared by all Muslims globally, and it does not represent every Islamic tradition. Many Muslim-majority countries operate under entirely different political systems. The Iranian model is one interpretation shaped by a particular historical moment. Third, many Iranians separate personal faith from political authority. A person may pray, fast during Ramadan, attend religious commemorations, and still question government policies or criticize state institutions. Disagreement with the political system does not automatically mean rejection of Islam. In public discussions and periods of protest, economic conditions, social restrictions, and governance issues are often central concerns. These debates reflect tensions about political management, not necessarily about religious belief itself. Fourth, the current period in Iran highlights the complexity of the relationship between religion and state power. Leadership transitions, economic pressure from sanctions, demographic change, and regional tensions all interact with the country's religious structure. The system established after the revolution continues to evolve under internal and external pressure. It faces questions from younger generations, reform-minded voices, conservative defenders of the status quo, and international actors. These dynamics demonstrate that the connection between religion and government in Iran is not static. It is contested and shaped by ongoing events. Understanding these realities does not mean defending the Iranian government or dismissing legitimate concerns about rights and freedoms. It means recognizing that Iran is a society with varied opinions, complex institutions, and historical depth. Islam in Iran is shaped by theology, culture, politics, economics, and lived experience.
Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.